Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today for another webinar in our Market Access and International Approvals webinar series. My name is Kevin and I'm part of the Certification and Approvals technical staff here at Vista Compliance Laboratories. Today I'll be presenting to you the certification and approval regulations as well as the technical requirements for electrical equipment, electronics, and wireless product and device approval in Sri Lanka. The Telecommunication Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka, otherwise known as the TRC, regulates the radio frequency spectrum and regulatory standardization in Sri Lanka, as well as the import, distribution, and sale of wireless and telecommunication products in the Sri Lankan market. Vista Laboratories is an EMC RF compliance test lab and product certification body, and we are experts in global regulatory approvals for radio frequency devices. So today we'll be going over the requirements of radio frequency and telecommunications approvals in Sri Lanka. In this webinar, we will provide an overview of the major topics necessary to get your radio devices on the right track for authorization and distribution in Sri Lanka. If you have any questions on the topics presented today or any other immediate questions regarding compliance testing and product certifications, you can reach us at info@vista-compliance.com. So let's begin the presentation. So moving on, let's go over the TRC. So the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka, or otherwise known as the TRC, regulates radio frequency and the standardization of radio and telecom equipment in Sri Lanka. The purpose of the Radio and Telecommunication Terminal Equipment RTTE type approvals rule is to ensure a RTTE, which is used in Sri Lanka, complies with the regulatory standards set out in these rules and requirements for compatibility and safety. Type approval assures good network performance, prevents distortion and degradation of network, avoids interference, safeguard and preserves network integrity, and eliminate dumping of inferior or substandard equipment to the market. The main scope of the RTTE type approvals are applicable for all types of RTTE intended to be imported, marketed, manufactured, or used in Sri Lanka. The Commission requires that all RTTE should obtain the type approval before importing, marketing, and operating in Sri Lanka. The importation of certain types of RTTE, to be determined by the Commission from time to time, may be exempted from type approval. Individuals and business entities who intend to manufacture, import, or sell used RTTE should first ensure that the equipment has been type approved by the Commission for use in Sri Lanka. The Commission maintains a type approval register on its website containing the type of RTTE that are type approved by the Commission. These rules require RTTE to comply with relevant technical specifications and to be type approved by the Commission before releasing it to the market. And so here we have the two TRC approval methods. So we have the standard method along with the simplified method, and these vary in different ways, and we're going to go over that in the next slide. So here we have the two different type approval processes. So the registration for either standard or simplified must be done by a Sri Lankan company. So for the standard, we need to provide the RTTE with a test sample that can be held up for 2 years. Along with that, also submitting an application with all of the documents. And if in compliance, a certificate will be approved and granted by the TRC. This process can take up to 30 days to complete, but it also can vary as well. Next, we have the simplified process. So the supplier must ensure that the equipment applied for is identical to the equipment that is already approved. This does not need test reports, but a sample may be required. And for the process, this can take around 10 days to complete but it also can vary as well. So next we have a list of regulated products by the TRC. So every telecommunication equipment traded, made, assembled, or imported or used in Sri Lanka is required to comply with the technical regulations of the TRC. So here is a non-exhaustive list of the regulated products for wireless and telecommunication. This includes things such as Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, SRD, RFID, GSM, WCDMA, LTE, WLAN, UWB, Zigbee, tire pressure sensors, and GPS on the wireless side. On the telecommunications side, however, we have T1 and E1 transmission, ISDN BRI, ADSL, PSTN, video conferencing equipment, telephony equipment, satellite equipment, broadcasting equipment, and radar as well. Next, let's move on to the scope of the TRC. Alright, so moving on, we have just looked at some of the products that are regulated under the TRC. As you can see, there is a vast amount of products that are regulated under the TRC. However, let's talk about the scope of the TRC itself. So, the TRC covers EMC and RF, EMC, and safety as well. And next we're going to talk about some of the general information regarding the TRC. Alright, so moving on to a general overview of the Telecommunication Regulatory Authority, or the TRC as it's known. So it carries out EMC approval for non-RF and non-telecom products. EMC approval is required for all products that don't hold TRC approval certificates. The manufacturers must get a test report from a TRC authorized lab. A local rep is required and is required to start the process of a type approval. Next, the certificate is valid for 4 years, and there is also a renewal process as well. Alright, so moving on, let's further talk about the TRC. So multiple models will not be able to use a single certificate. Each certificate can only be one model. A label can only be purchased by the local importer. Importers are allowed to use the simplified process. Type approval certificates that were obtained under the standard process should be used for this process. An exception letter is only issued to a local vendor, not a manufacturer or any other party. And as we talked about, a local rep is needed. Family approvals are allowed. Multiple branding is not allowed, and the certificate is valid for 4 years. And there is also a renewal process that is able to be done. And so moving on, we're going to go over a general FAQ regarding the TRC. So multiple models will not be able to use a single certificate, as we mentioned. Each certificate can only be one model. As we said, a label can only be purchased by a local importer. Importers are allowed to use the simplified process. Type approval certificates that were obtained under the standard process should be used for this process. An exception letter is only issued to a local vendor and not a manufacturer or any other party. Along with that, vehicle embedded devices do not require a label. And the country of the manufacturer is not where the factory is, but where the physical manufacturer is located. So any product being sold in Sri Lanka must comply with the applicable regulations. Some products may need a safety certificate along with the type approval certificate, so the product will have to comply to any safety regulations as well. This is just a short list of some of the regulations for RF in EMC and safety. So for RF and EMC, we have the general regulation, which is EN 301489-1. Then we have for SRD, which is 9 kilohertz to 40 gigahertz, EN 300-220-2. And for equipment intended to be used within a telecommunication network, it needs to follow EN 301489-7. And for point-to-point and point-to-multipoint equipment, the regulation applied is EN 301-753. For safety, electrical apparatuses for test and measurement control and lab is EN 60950. For power, transformer, power supplies, and reactors, it is EN 60950. For the UPS, it is EN 609-50. And for audio, video, and information and communication apparatuses, it also does follow EN 60950. And moving on, we're going to go over testing for the TRC. So in-country testing is not required, and in most cases, it can leverage CE test reports as part of the approval process and avoid in-country testing. The TRA will accept test reports of the relevant European standards, but testing must be performed at an ISO 17025 accredited test facility, such as ourselves. Next, we have the certification process of the TRC. So here are the requirements for certification. You will need to submit test reports confirming compliance with the applicable standards in the technical regulations, photographs of the equipment and installation, a user manual, functional description of the equipment, schematic diagram and PCB layout, and proof of payment of the non-refundable type approval fee. The TRC may request the applicant to submit additional supporting documents if they feel it is necessary. Once documents have been approved, the applicant will either need to pay for the TRC label to affix onto the product or send in a written request to place their own printed TRC label on the product. And let's go over some general questions regarding certification for the TRC. So the lead time, it can be up to 30 days for standard or 10 days for simplified, but can vary. The validity is for 4 years. The local rep is required, or the applicant must be living in the country. Family approvals are allowed with a max of 4 listed per certificate. Modular approvals are allowed, and multiple branding is not permitted. And let's go over the labeling in the TRC. So for the product marking, the TRC label is required. The requirements include the TRC logo, the TRC issued certificate number, and the label must be attached to each device that has obtained a certificate. The packaging and container must have a label, and the label will be received by the manufacturer after payment is submitted to the commission. So as you can see on the example label here, we have the name of the vendor, the type of equipment, the make and model, the type approval number, and the date of approval to release the equipment to the market. The reference number or the IMIE or serial number is also seen here. And here we have an example of a certificate from the TRC. So certificate information and equipment records are publicly available and searchable. The following information will be shown: the radio equipment type approval number and certificate number, equipment category and model, the model itself, the power and frequency information, and certificates are valid for 4 years, and the radio equipment type approval number must be shown on the label. So let's move on to importation into Sri Lanka. So before any radio equipment is imported or used in Sri Lanka, the equipment must be certified in advance. The certification is intended to protect consumers and guarantee the interoperability and interworking among equipment. Imported equipment will be checked by customs and the market surveillance authorities. If the equipment does not have a certificate or a label, it will not be allowed into the country. Any device that has been significantly changed after obtaining a certificate will not be allowed into the country and will have to obtain a new certificate. Sri Lanka local agents must be the applicant and not the manufacturers themselves to obtain the certificate, but they do not have to act as the final importer of the product. So let's talk about surveillance under the TRC. So surveillance is done by multiple parties after the product has hit the market. TRC and its compliance division put in place market surveillance procedures to audit, monitor, and assess the products and services. Surveillance is performed when a complaint is made by the consumer or a random audit is conducted by the commission to ensure compliance. Random inspections done on the premises of the importers, manufacturers, and etc. There are penalties and sanctions, which can be be imprisoned or fined if selling equipment that is not approved. And the certificate can be revoked if modifications are made, equipment fails conformity assessment, certificate holder violated condition in certificate, and labels that are faked or not genuine. Lastly, we're going to go over the product changes under the TRC. So changes that are not permitted include changes to brand equipment name, model, or function, and changes to technical specifications such as operating frequency band or RF power. The standard under which the type approval was obtained must not change, and changes that are permitted include transferring a certificate to others, and any details updated after the initial approval, such as an address, certificate holder name, or etc. However, you must notify the TRC immediately. This concludes our webinar on Sri Lanka market access, certification, and approvals for electrical equipment and wireless products. I hope this webinar was helpful for you in understanding the process for TRC approval and certifications, as well as what requirements are applicable to your products. Compliance with the technical requirements of the TRC is required for all radio and telecom products and ensures telecommunication network interoperability, avoids interference between telecommunication equipment, ensures public safety, and supports national telecommunication industry, innovation, and engineering. All electrical equipment and devices require approval in Sri Lanka prior to distribution or placement on the market. Vista Compliance Labs specializes in certifications, approvals, and compliance testing for electrical and radio frequency devices. We are a 17025 accredited EMC RF compliance test lab and 17065 accredited product certification body. We are a telecommunications certification body in the United States, Canada, European Union, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan, and we provide certification and approvals for all product types in countries all over the world. If you would like to stay in touch with regulatory updates, follow us online. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions on the information presented today, or any other general inquiries, you can reach us anytime at info@vista-compliance.com. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.